What's up, everybody? Welcome to the latest Undisputed Roundtable. I am not Edward. We don't have Edward today. We've been trying to get this roundtable together for a little while, but Ash has been traveling. I've been traveling. And so we're making it happen today without Edward. We couldn't wait. So I'm Will Kinsler, comms director on Undisputed. We've got Ash Habib, our founder and creative director, and a new face joining us today, Jeremy Sheppard, brand new community manager. How's it going, gentlemen?
All good. All
You're
good.
supposed to answer. You're supposed to answer when I ask a question. That's how this. I know I'm not normally the question person, but that's how it works. So yeah, excited to have you join us, Jeremy. Obviously you're known in the community as J Shep, and we're happy to have you here. Have another voice in the conversation. We're gonna be talking about a bunch of different stuff today. It's been a while since we've been able to do a roundtable, so it's been, I think, about a month since we shipped our last update, and I'm sure as the community remembers, we shipped two sort of very near to each other, our .4 update and then our .4.1 update not long after that. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we think that one has gone, and then we'll talk a little bit about just different areas of the game, areas of work, things that we're talking about, some stuff that we've seen pop up in player discussion. But we'll kick it off with just sort of what people have been saying about the update. So for a refresher, we've shipped a bunch of different things. We shipped fighters, which we always do. But some notable things that went well is, instant replay, diagonal dodge mechanic. And then, it feels like some of the things that we're hearing from community that we need to continue to work on, obviously, is online stability and what that online experience is. And then, just sort of some, thoughts from players around, hey, like, there's these areas of the game that we want you to work on, and we think that this is taking longer than we would like. And some of that is specifically around gameplay, right? So we come in here and we talk on the roundtable about that. And I wanted to ask you, Ash, what would you say to somebody, that right now is in our community, they've joined us in early access. Man, it's just taken a while. I'm giving you guys feedback on stamina. I'm giving you feedback on, punches and damage, and this is taking a long time. What's up with that? Why is it taking so long?
So look, I guess first of all, I want to say thank you to those people for the patience, really, in terms of being on this journey with us from early access. I know it can be frustrating sometimes, where it's like, well, we know that there's some issues that need resolving and sorting out, whether it's balancing, whether they're bugs. But really, the challenge that we have is just one of balance internally, right? We have a finite amount of resource, and the team's building out new features, essentially getting the game finished, ready for our full launch. And what I've got to do is try and balance out between building those new features and actually, what, we've got a live game right now that needs a bunch of work on it at the moment. So whether it's stamina balancing, damage balancing, making the game feel more dangerous, a whole host of things that we already know that we have to work on and try and fix. But yeah, it's just a case of trying to balance that out between new stuff and obviously stuff we've got already got in the game. So yeah, I know, I guess, even as a player myself, it can feel frustrating sometimes. But yeah, look, we really appreciate the feedback coming through. We're building this game with the community, with you guys. So, keep the feedback coming in. We do go through that, and we prioritize that in terms of all the work that we've got to finish off.
Yeah. But so expectation setting, right? Like, some of these things are still going to take a while, right? We're not in the next update. We'll have made, progress on stamina, but we won't have finalized how, stamina will work or damage. Like, those are all things, that still are taking time. So I guess in some sense, we're asking for a little bit of, continued patience, right? Knowing that, for us, we're having to think about where the game is at right now and how it'll be, when we do the next update. But we're also thinking about the finish line, right? Which is like the ultimate thing that we're thinking about, why we do early access and why these things happen. And so we want to make sure that people understand that while these things are taking time, like our core vision for the game is still what it's been, right? And the part where some of this stuff is taking longer doesn't mean that we've gone in a different direction or our game is like an arcade boxing game now. It just means that some of these things we have to prioritize against other work that's happening, and so we're clear about that. Like, those are things also that people want, right? The other work that you're talking about is things like creative fighter, career mode, that sort of, stuff that people are ultimately really looking forward to. And I guess the other thing is, like, the last couple of updates in particular have taken a little bit longer. We've taken a little bit longer to ship them. Can you talk about why that is, or why shipping as fast as we could possibly ship and just cranking out updates might not be the best route for us to get to that finish line?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, I think we all like the idea of shipping out updates as quickly as possible, right? But I think, having gone through the process and, we've made a couple of mistakes along the way. I think for us as a studio, we just have to learn, learn from those mistakes that we make as a young studio. And I think, putting out an update, there's a lot involved in terms of even balancing that, or balancing any feature we're putting out as an update, and then making sure that's going through a full QA process. But then at the same time, it's a case of, balancing out those features that we've got coming up as well, like, whether it's character creator, whether it's career mode. It's a case of, well, if we try and push this update out and add a whole bunch of stuff in this update, then potentially are we pushing the timeline back for the other features that we want to put into the game? So I think sometimes it's a bit of a false economy in terms of trying to, put in as much stuff as possible, because at the same time, even with balancing, right, I don't want Undisputed to feel like a new game in every update, right? When we're making these changes, we've got to try and find a good baseline and a good foundation to build from. And I think that's the most important thing for me right now, in terms of getting the game to where I want it to be, right? Which is, an authentic boxing game where if you make a mistake, you get punished, right? And I think that's where we're trying to get to.
Yeah. Let's talk about online. So we shipped 4.1, with a view to incremental improvements to online. I love to hear, Jeremy, what do you're obviously kind of at the ground floor of where some of this conversation is happening. It feels like maybe we moved the needle a little bit, but online is obviously still an area that can use improvement in our game to get it to where we want to be. What are players saying right now?
Well, overall, players kind of have somewhat of a mixed review. Like, I get some of both. Like, I see some people saying that for them, online has improved drastically. Like, some people have been saying things like, I've been getting through a full fight for the first time. But on the other hand, I got some people saying that it's actually gotten worse, and like they're having an even harder time getting through a fight. Some people saying that as soon as they try to load into a fight, it disconnects, or it disconnects midway in round one. So like the spectrum is literally so broad. Like, I'm getting like the polar opposite on both sides at this point.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing some data that supports that, right? That it's one of these weird things where sometimes if you make something a little bit better, there's other aspects of it that feel worse. So, like, for example, I think we're, at least anecdotally, seeing less of like, oh, well, I got ghost punched from around the ring, right? But people still recognize that desync is a thing, and how that relates to like a round host advantage, right? Which, obviously it feels bad if you all of a sudden get hit and dropped and it looked like your opponent was on the other side of the screen. But it also doesn't feel great if things look stable and feel more stable, but you recognize that, like, oh, what I'm seeing is not the same thing that my opponent sees. So
Right.
we thought that there was value in still in shipping that the update that we did, and that we have moved the needle there a little bit. But I think something that we should talk about that is probably important to mention here is, like, in the past on the roundtable, we've said, hey, we're bringing in people, we're bringing in experts external to our studio to help us improve online and get it to where it needs to be. And Ash, we actually haven't shipped any of that work yet, right? The .4.1 stuff does not include those bigger pieces of work that we've been working on with externals.
That's right. Yeah, I mean the updates that we've shipped so far, and specifically to online, have all been fixes that we've made internally, like within the studio, so our own internal team. And yeah, the larger fixes that will be coming, with our partners that we're working with, none of those have been shipped yet. So there's a process where obviously, we're very excited about the work that's taking place there. And the next stages will be essentially us having a QA pass internally, making sure that the problems that people are facing online have been resolved before we do ship that update. So we're making good progress, and yeah, those fixes are up and coming. So I guess I don't want the community to think that the online updates we've shipped so far have been the major fixes that we've been talking about in the last few updates. So yeah, I mean that's to come, and we're very confident that the kind of desync issues that people are experiencing will be resolved. But it's good to hear that some of the ghost punches have been eliminated to a certain extent. But yeah, those fixes have all been through our internal team, and the larger fixes are still to come.
Yeah, and so just asking for a little more patience. We know it's tough. Online is one of our we have to make this good things, right, before we can ship this game, right? I think there's a few things that are really important to us, and that's like a critically important thing that we know has got to be in a great state when we ship, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about AI. This is one of those things where we have over the last several updates been able to make those incremental changes to AI. I think in this last one, what we really saw was like a lot more behaviors, right, that the AI is doing, and I think so things like it was doing diagonal dodge or things that it hadn't been doing before. What do we think, Jeremy, about what people are saying about AI in this last update?
Well, I know that most of the people who have been playing for quite some time, they've had some positives about it, saying like, "Hey, the AI is finally, coming off a little more challenging." But then you also get the other side of the spectrum where people are saying like, "Hey, I kind of wish that amateur felt more like I was fighting an easier AI." It's almost like the trickle down for the difficulty has went all the way down to the easiest difficulty as well. So they're like, "Hey, I feel like I'm fighting the undisputed bot. Like I'm getting beat up." And of course my knee-jerk response is like, hey, get better. But I definitely understand like the idea that if you're fighting like the easier bot, you want an easier opponent. But overall, the behavior has gotten better, and they're making more sensible moves as it pertains to even how they take damage and how they respond when they take damage, like backing away from the fighter and kind of like being a little bit more choosy. But it still has some work to be done for sure.
Yeah, and I think you correct me if I'm wrong here, Ash, but I think like our point of view on this is like, first, let's make sure that it's doing all the things that we want it to do, all the actions that an AI, should take in the fight. And then we'll get to a point where we can focus even more on difficulty and spreading that out. So like, I think what Jeremy is saying has kind of been like a through line since we've shipped, where sometimes people have said, hey, the lower difficulty really isn't that much easier than the higher one, whereas the highest end players, people that play the game a lot, maybe are still feeling like it's a little too easy for them. It feels like that once we get all those actions in that we want, that then the focus will be around how do we calibrate how difficult the AI is to play against.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think from my perspective, right, the undisputed difficulty as an example, that should be a difficulty where majority of players should lose against, basically. That's what I want us to get to. But at the same time, I don't want us to use the easy route, right? I don't think we've used the shortcut or the easy route for any part of our game. I think if there's always been two paths that we could have taken as a game studio, we've never taken the easy route.
Yeah.
And
shortcut. So shortcut being like add a ton of damage or health to it, and or a ton of damage, like trying to get it to fight, good enough to give you a competition based on how it's fighting, rather than just putting a million like health on it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it was about the behavior of the AI. And yeah, without turning them into some huge tank with, you know, 3 million hit points and, you know, infinite stamina and things like that. So I think for us, it's just a case of trying to get the most out of the AI. And then we try and find a foundation, right? And I think that's why I guess Jeremy, you know, the points with regards to, you know, the easier AI opponent doesn't seem, you know, so much different to the higher difficulty ones. And I think, you know, the reason for that is because we are trying to find that baseline for the AI to start from. So even with the AI improvements we've made so far, you know, as far as I'm concerned, we're still very early in that journey in terms of making that AI difficult enough or a place where I'm going to be essentially happy with. So yeah, we're still making those AI changes. There's more AI changes coming in the next update, and we'll continue to have those updates coming.
Awesome. And one of the things I think also that, you know, can impact where we get with AI is like, I think probably one of the biggest persistent discussions in the community, and that's around damage and how damage happens in our game, with players really wanting, you know, risk and reward to feel like much more consequential. I made a mistake, I got to pay for it. If I make a mistake, you know, a few times, I'm done, right? And obviously, making those kind of changes and on the balance side can impact the AI as well. But I'm hoping you could talk a little bit first about like, so we'll talk about damage, and there's a few different points of that discussion, but I thought maybe we could start about just like, can we talk about just what the goal is, right? Like, what is the goal on how you want damage to and that risk reward to be in the game? Because we sometimes hear these questions about, well, wait a minute, you know, did you guys change it? Do you want it to be less for, you know, more forgiving now? Do you want it to be more like arcade? And I just want to make sure that we're totally clear about what it is that you want that to look like and what you think good looks like.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think my decision on this hasn't changed from the very first moment, you know, we started to make this game, right? Where, you know, if you make a mistake, you know, the game should punish you for that, right? And you know, whether that means, you know, somebody's slipped your punch and come back with a counter and either knocked you out or knocked you down. I think that's kind of where I need the game to be. So yeah, absolutely, we're not heading down, you know, the arcade route or anything like that. I think, you know, sometimes, you know, there's a large audience in terms of, you know, what kind of games people like, right? Whether it's just a game where they can go and throw 1,000 punches and you know, have a 12-round fight, or there's players who just want a you know, a 1 or 2 round blast out. And I think for us, you know, it's just finding that balance between a game where, you know, it will punish you for throwing a power shot and, you know, somebody coming back with a counter, or if you've gassed yourself out, you know, you're more susceptible to getting knocked out. I think for us, it's absolutely about you know, trying to reflect the sport, where if you just kind of going all guns blazing, you should be prepared to get knocked out. I think that's kind of the game that we're making.
Right.
But
But we're
look, I
not
can
there.
understand why.
Yeah,
Understand
but
why
we're not
people need
there.
to
But
see
we're
it
not
that
there
way.
yet. So let's talk about what some of those things are. Right? There's a few different steps and things that, and some of them we've talked about. Right? But like one step that we made in this last update, which maybe was a small step, but did see some impact, is like we talk a lot about Wilder, right? Because if you think about that fighter that can, you know, make a mistake against them and they blast you out of there, that's the guy that you think of, right? And we've talked a bunch about here over the last few months and on the roundtable, like he's kind of one of the people that we look at to understand how that's going. So we made some changes to him. We put these traits on him, right? That I'd like to have you talk about. And he's now winning in that update 12% more of his fights. He's knocking people out in those fights 23% more often. So moving in the right direction, but not totally there. Let's talk about first about the trait system. How does it work, and what can we expect to see?
So we've now built out the trait system to have 3 tiers. So there's a tier 1, you know, tier 2, and a tier 3. And essentially each tier is more dangerous than the previous one. And the reason why we wanted to have more tiers is because, we wanted the fighters to feel more unique as well. So, take for example, Joe Frazier with the, smoking left hook trait. There's obviously a lot of boxers in the game who have got very strong left hooks, so they're known to have powerful left hooks, right? So, Tommy Morrison, for example. But I guess I would argue there's probably not, Joe Frazier's probably got one of the most lethal left hooks in boxing. So, we wanted to differentiate the traits between those boxers. So, yeah, as an example, Joe Frazier will have the level 3 of the left hook trait compared to the boxers who might have a level 1 or a level 2. So, I think what that does is just gives us a huge amount of freedom in terms of making sure certain fighters feel different compared to others. And, for example, Deontay Wilder, with his right hand bomb trait, he's going to be at a level 3, compared to somebody else who might have a level 1 or a 2. So I just think it gives, builds out that freedom. But it also, the decisions we're making as well is also having an impact and, improving the career mode that's coming on down the line.
Yeah, and so we'll see more fighters, with those different levels of traits on them moving forward then.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the next update, people can expect to see, a lot of fighters having essentially an updated pass on all the traits that they have.
Okay, so that's one thing. What are some of the other things that we're doing to make that risk reward, make that consequence happen?
So, whether it's the amount of damage taken from a counter, whether it's the amount of damage taken from a power shot that's landed clean, we are looking at critical zones because the game does have critical zones. Whether you hit on the chin or on the temple, it makes a difference whether it's a glancing blow or not. So, we're making some changes in terms of how the whole damage zones work on the face as well. Because we want people to be rewarded by throwing an accurate shot, right? Especially if it's following up from a counter or a power shot that's also a counter as well. So we're making these changes, and there's also things around like some of the stuns and the hit reactions that we're working on right now, because I think we've made the game built around the movement of the fighters. It's very fluid, but at the same time, we're going to try and make it feel like a more of a controlled fight. And that's only going to help when it comes to things like making decisions and some of the shots feel more meaningful. So yeah, those changes will be coming not only in the next update, but obviously further updates beyond that, because we do have a number of changes that we'll be making.
So for the sake of clarity, when you talk about controlled, right, you're talking about things like, oh, I've got hit with a really big shot. I probably can't immediately then return fire as if nothing happened, right? Because then it just feels like something consequential hasn't happened to me, right? I haven't actually paid. Like, you want somebody to have the awareness, like, one of like, I just made something really good happen, right, to my opponent. And if you're the opponent, you want them to feel like, oh, I messed up, right? I can't immediately, just punch, right? So you say more control, just like that, sort of like less chaotic in terms of like your ability to just immediately take an action when you've actually kind of been buzzed or hit with a big shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing: if you if you play the game as a boxer, you generally your fight doesn't usually play out like that, right? Where you're just throwing punch after punch after punch. But having seen people play the game, some fights do look like it's just a little bit too chaotic, where they're just kind of like swinging wildly, and you're kind of thinking, well, how realistic is that? So absolutely, we're introducing things like hit stuns, where if you've been hit with a counter or a big shot, then you're not able to just immediately carry on throwing punches, and then that kind of feels more rewarding to the other player who's landed that shot, right? So there's things like that we're looking at, and the vulnerability system that we've spoken about before, that's going through a phase right now where we're just building that out. So again, it's making people think before they throw a punch, where if you get hit whilst throwing a punch or mid punch, then there's consequences to that. So that's the direction we're taking with the game. So it's not necessarily slowing the pace down a little bit, but it's just almost forcing people to think about what they're going to throw.
Yeah, or react to what's happened, right? And be thoughtful about it. I want to talk about stamina next, right? It feels like damage and stamina, those are kind of like, that's like the two-headed dragon that we come in here in the round table and talk about when it's balanced every time. What do you think, Jeremy? I want to have you talk about where you feel like players feel like we're at right now, and then I want Ash to talk a bit about what we're shipping in the next update to hopefully move us forward with stamina.
Gotcha. I feel like as far as the community is concerned, like they can notice there's a few that notice some minor improvements, but the overall consensus is still that we would like punches to mean more and to count more in the sense of like being able to see the damage that's done and being able to feel it in real time. Like if you take enough punches, it should reflect. And if you're throwing 400 punches in a fight, your stamina it should reflect. You know, despite how good someone's conditioning could be, you know, if I'm throwing 600 punches, then there's no way that my stamina should be in the 90s. You know what I'm saying? Like, because you still threw 600 punches that fight. And if I'm getting punched in the face enough, I shouldn't be walking through them punches. And just kind of like in light of what we just talked about, you know, I feel like if you take enough counter punches, like I've seen some matches where people have taken maybe 30 counter punches, or even just in one round, I've seen someone take about 10 counter punches straight and walk straight through them. So like there's definitely still some improvements that need to be made. Even though we have seen the minor changes, you know, we would still like to see it in more of a big way.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I think we've seen what we've seen in terms of like the ability to throw so many punches is because actually so far in our game across all the weight classes, there's not really any differentiation, right? And that, Ash, is
No.
something that is gonna change beginning in the next update.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the next update coming, each weight class will have its own stamina kind of calculation. So essentially, bantamweight will be able to throw a different amount of punches compared to a heavyweight, and that was something that we've been meaning to implement for a little while now. So yeah, I'm glad to say that that's coming in the next update. So stamina will definitely feel different to everybody playing the game, where I guess I can kind of already say that gone are the days where you can throw 600 punches and end up with 90% stamina. So yeah, we're very confident in terms of the next update coming in terms of the changes we've made to stamina. So yeah, the punches will definitely have an impact on your stamina now, and obviously going to the body will have more of an impact as well. So there's some stamina changes coming, but again, like with a lot of things that we're doing right now, it's not going to be like, okay, stamina's done in the next update and that's it. It'll be the first of continual changes, but the next one's going to be pretty meaningful as far as stamina is concerned.
Yeah, we'll be looking forward to that feedback, especially obviously, you think about online play where so many of the fights happen in the heavyweight division, which will be most impacted, right? Because they're going to be the ones to take the biggest hit if it were, or as it were. It'll be interesting to see how people feel about that and have some conversation about where they think it's at. Okay, old school moveset. So I'd love to hear a little bit about this, Ash. And it sounded like we accidentally put this live a little bit in one of the earlier updates, and then brought it out. Although from what I understood, Jeremy, I think people actually kind of liked what they saw. So we're hopefully feeling good about that. Tell us about what does it look like? What's the purpose, Ash? And then we can talk about who will see it on in the next update.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess first of all, as far as the mistake goes, not hiding behind the small indie studio banner, but yeah, we've made a few mistakes, right? And we hold our hands up to when we make them. So this one was actually unintended. I still remember I was the shock of when I think Alex mentioned to me that, Rocky Marciano, what happened? What happened there? So yeah, look, I think the purpose for us was, again, we're really happy with how our fighters move in the game. The motion capture we've done with our fighters, but at the same time, the authenticity around it, right? We've got the likes of Rocky Marciano in the game, and many of the legends that will be coming in down the line. So I think the important thing, I've spoken about this quite a bit before, is about doing justice to these guys, and part of that is making them look like how they fought as well. So I think for me, it was important to try and replicate how fighters fought in the older eras, and the older school kind of movements that we've got in the game kind of reflect that. So it's not as fluid, and they're not dancing around or bouncing around as much as other fighters, or the modern fighters we've got. They are a little bit more flat-footed, kind of head down and kind of stalking you. So yeah, our plan is to kind of roll that out to some of the other older fighters in the game, and the older fighters that will be coming in further updates as well. Will also have the older style movement.
Yeah, so we'll have it on Rocky Marciano and Joe Louis first, and then of course we do have older fighters we'll ship in the future. And I think one of the reasons also why this is probably more viable now with the sort of stalking type fighter is because we did ship diagonal dodges in the last update. And again, if there's a third thing, if it's not a two-headed monster but a three-headed monster, the third head that we talk about in the round table, right, will always be front foot fighting versus back foot fighting. How we're trying to balance that. We have a lot of talk usually in here about step back straight and how people feel about that. And last time I know we talked about putting diagonal dodge in being sort of a first step about that. How do we feel like that's going so far? I'll start with you, Jeremy.
Well, it's definitely it's definitely less spammable. Like I just can't do them back to back to back to back to back. I think actually before I got on the team, I made a short video on my TikTok about how often I could do it, and
Right.
I like the fact that you get tired doing it, but it still seems a little overpowered because if you rest a little bit, you can do it again. You just can't do it back to back. So there's a little bit more of a time gap there, but it's still a very prominent strike. People can still use it against you pretty well. The diagonal dodging did help, but now that's kind of like the go-to move. Like I need this move, to like counteract it.
Right. And probably, open a little more viability for some of those fighters that we think about, right? Like it helps some fighters more than others, right? Like making Joe Frazier a little more viable. And I think we saw through some of the pick rates and the data that we looked at, people trying more of those fighters, and hopefully they're feeling like they have more of a path to get there. But then it comes back to there's a part that's like, okay, have we made it more balanced in terms of front foot and back foot? And then there's the part that's like, does this feel real? Does it feel authentic? And I want to have you talk, Ash, about that, because we think that when it comes to front foot, back foot, and things like how we look at step in punches and step back punches, we think that there's still work that we can do to make that look and feel better and feel a bit more authentic to what you'd want to see in a real fight.
Yeah, so I think the punches obviously in the game that we've got, whether they're directional punches, front foot, back foot, or even stationary, we're not finished by any stretch in terms of how the punches are looking, or the punches that are currently in the game right now. So we do have plans to have more motion capture sessions with fighters coming into the studio. So yeah, we do have more of those planned, where we will be replacing and changing some of the punches in the game, whether they're the front foot punches or whether they're the back foot punches. So yeah, I think that is something that we're looking forward to in terms of just improving what we've got. It has taken us a bit of time to get to where we are right now in terms of making the punches look impactful and meaningful. But yeah, in terms of like the back foot straight, that is something that we are looking to change out. So yeah, the motion capture sessions we've got planned, we know exactly what we need to get out of them.
Yeah, and it feels a little bit like because we have all of these different punches that we've recorded in the game, sometimes we'll swap a punch in, for another one, or something that we think, looks or feels a little bit better. And sometimes we're swapping out a punch because we think this punch is more effective. In this case, we maybe be swapping out a punch for something that we think is too effective, or doesn't, with that step back straight, where it doesn't look quite the way that we'd want it to. It doesn't feel, what we don't want, right, is for it to feel like this is the get me out of jail button, right? To hit. We want it to feel a little bit more. You have to be thoughtful about it, right? Because obviously, Jeremy, you're talking about like the part that's like, okay, well, Now I've got this one thing, I've got this one other thing I can use against it. So that's better, right? In terms of the balance, but now it's about like, let's make it feel more authentic. And, hopefully, mocaps is tricky, right, Ash? Like we don't necessarily, it's not there's a bit of an art to it, right? And, it's not always easy to predict maybe exactly, until we get that stuff in the game and polish it up, exactly how it's going to play out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, as having, not done this before, right, in terms of the motion capture side of things, the consensus was, or the assumption was, we get world champions in and, they can do the motion capture and everything's perfect, right? But it turns out it doesn't work that way. So yeah, just because, you might have a boxer who's, an undefeated world champion and, there's probably 4 or 5 world champions we've brought into the studio that have done the motion capture for us. It doesn't always work out where, in the ring it might look great, but as far as a video game goes, might not look perfect. So I guess the easiest way I can explain that is, if you just take any random jab or a hook that a fighter throws in the ring, that might not be the most perfect jab or hook that person's ever thrown. So, you replicate that and say, okay, we're going to use a jab, we're going to use a hook from, this guy who's like, 35 wins, no losses, and, is the perfect fighter in the ring. You take that punch and you then replicate it for a boxer in the game, and it's not the perfect looking punch, or it's not the most ideal punch as far as the game goes. So
or
it's just
where it has
context
to
like
go
that.
on, or where it has to go on different fighters, right? Because like I think part of the issue with the step back straight, right, is that like you can use that on with a really big fighter, right? Where maybe somebody that size you would think is not agile enough to do the way that the animation plays out, right? And so it's just that variety of it, that you need to see.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I'm confident with the motion capture sessions we've got now, where we know exactly what we're looking to get out of these. Where in the past it was almost a case of, well, look, these guys are the experts, they know boxing, right? Who are we to tell them anything? But I think it's just finding that balance between what works in the ring might not always work in a video game.
For sure. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to talk about, and this has been a topic that's bubbled up, especially recently, is around, well, it's sort of 2 things, right? One of them is around game speed and the movement speed of fighters, with players feeling like it's faster than it was, say, in the online betas that we did last year. And then secondary to that, but related, is if you get to the side of somebody, if you're moving laterally and you get to the side of somebody, players feeling like your opponent snaps to you much faster than they did in the past. And I'm wondering, are these things that we're aware of? Are they things that we're looking at? And how do we feel about what we want that to look like in our game? What does good look like there?
Yeah, so I think, in terms of the rotation and the movement speed, both of those actually are topics that we're looking at right now. And the reason why I guess these things have changed over time is taking the rotation, for example. That was something that was done, whilst before we launched into early access, right? So it was a period between, the beta and the early access launch where we were making a few changes. And actually what transpired there was a bug that was logged where, on a couple of occasions you were able to get completely behind the opponent, which didn't look too great. And then it caused the other opponent to kind of snap towards you. So to negate that, or to actually fix that bug, the rotations were tightened so that scenario was, could never happen again. But I think, I guess as far as balancing goes with the rest of the game, right? There's times where maybe we've probably taken something a little bit too far just to completely negate the negative side of what could potentially happen. So what we're looking to do is bring some of that back, right? So whilst it might not be exactly how it was in the beta, because obviously we don't want situations where you're completely behind somebody. We've probably taken that a little bit too far, so we'll be looking to bring that back a little bit.
Yeah, and I think people like that one, right? Because when we talk about the risk reward and things feeling consequential, you want to feel rewarded for getting to an advantageous position, right? And I think that's what that's about. And how about more specifically to the movement speed? I mean, we so you talked about the snapping. Like, do you believe it feels different than it did, 8-9 months ago when we did the beta?
You see, it's a tough one, right? Because I think going through an iterative process, sometimes it's difficult to see kind of how something was 8 or 9 months ago if you've made very small incremental changes along that path, right? So having looked at the footage and the game previously, is it is apparent that the incremental changes we've made have probably felt a little bit I guess more noticeable, right? So I think with movement speed, it's something that we're looking to try and again just bring back a little bit to how it was, during that beta period.
Awesome. So yeah, just a couple of other small things I think that we can talk about is we shipped instant replay. I mean, Jeremy, you're a creator, so like getting those kind of tools, and obviously our replay that we shipped is sort of a first version of that where it just shows an awesome moment. But we are working on a larger replay. So what can we expect out of that, Ash? And then I mean, I'd just love to hear from you, Jeremy. Like as a creator, like how important is it for you to be able to get some of that kind of stuff to make great content?
Oh well, honestly, it's very important, man. Like, like you want to create moments, you want to create angles. And me personally, like, yeah, the people can nitpick about like certain camera angles, but I loved it out the gate. I was like, yeah, like I even use ringside dolly, even though it's not the most optimal. I love some of the camera angles I get. So angles for me are very important. And those replays, man, it was nice to see for the first time. I was really enjoying myself, especially when you catch somebody clean and you get to see their face fold up. It was very rewarding. It was very rewarding.
And so, I mean, obviously we put that out and made it optional. Basically, it was default off. We told people you have to turn it on to be able to try it, but it seems like it
Yeah.
went over well. And we've seen some really cool like knockouts and stuff like that. What's the next stage of that for us, Ash?
So we are looking to, actually the guys are working on a full fight replay at the moment. So the instant replay was essentially the first step, but we are looking to build out the full fight replay, so you can essentially replay the whole fight. So that's the next step essentially. But whilst we're doing that, we're looking to see how we can improve the instant replay at the same time as well. So yeah, we're not done, but by any stretch in terms of the instant replay. That's the first iteration of it. So yeah, we're looking forward to seeing how the full fight replay pans out.
Sounds like one of those features you were talking about where we have to prioritize things, and one of those things I think people definitely expect is a replay feature. The other thing I wanted to touch on before we hop off of here, I think we talked about a little bit on the last roundtable, is just the visuals of the game, right? So sometimes when we talk about that, we're talking about the fighters, and you've talked about things like the amount of sweat, or lighting, or things that make a fighter look differently. We've talked about venues, and more specifically, we talked about, hey, players believe that some venues looked better 2 years ago than they look in the live game that we're shipping right now, and we said we agree. We're doing a full pass on the venues in the game, but what does that really mean, and what can players expect to see moving forward?
So there's two, I guess there's two major things that are going to impact that actually. So one is the cameras that are currently in the game. I think footage we've shown previously, we had the cameras like almost right up to the fighters, and then that obviously shows off, the sweat, it shows off the muscle definition, it shows off the scans of the boxes that we've got, right? So I think seeing action up close definitely changes the impact and the feeling of what you're seeing visually on screen. But I think the more we played with that camera angle, I guess during the initial closed testing phases that we had with the game, we were getting a few complaints from players about the fact that because the game is so fluid, and it's so free flowing, it just increased the motion sickness or the, the kind of experience around, getting dizzy or fighters spinning around each other, because we haven't limited the player's ability to be able to do that, right? So, one of the solutions basically for that was to pull the cameras out, a fair distance. So as soon as as soon as you do that, you take away, some of that visual fidelity, right? So instantly you kind of, okay, well, it doesn't look as great as it did before, but practically it's probably the better solution to take. But having said that, I was a big fan of the closer up camera. So we are looking to bring that back in. So there's right now we're going through some testing in terms of how we can potentially do that, and at the same time kind of minimize the whole kind of motion sickness around, spinning around fighters, right? So that's something that we're looking at the moment. And I suppose the second thing is quite a large engine upgrade that we're just currently going through right now. So it is a significant upgrade as far as the engine goes, and as part of that upgrade, there'll be some changes to the lighting in the venues. So this will be an incremental change that people will notice through the following updates. So they won't all appear in the next update, but certainly the next few updates, venues will be getting upgraded with the new lighting changes and the engine upgrade as well. So that's
So I
something we're
know
looking forward
you
to.
know what engine upgrade means, Ash, and I know what it means. But everybody that's watching might not know what it means. What does that mean? What does it mean we've gone through an engine upgrade, and why are we doing that?
So the engine that we're building the game on, the makers of that engine, they update that engine, right, in terms of like improving performance, improving stability, improving the amount of tools that we have to make things look better. And what we don't do is we don't upgrade like as soon as an update comes out. So they might have an update every single month, right? But what we're not going to do is upgrade our engine every single month, because it would just be a complete nightmare trying to do that. So, the engine upgrade here is there's essentially like almost 2 years worth of updates to the engine, as far as everything from lighting to shaders to basically how skin looks to everything that people are seeing in the game. So people can expect to see some visual improvements with the updates that we'll be making.
Awesome. We're excited for that. So I think that's it for us today. Really appreciate you guys taking the time. And obviously, we're going to continue to do these roundtables. Please, please, please drop in the comments here on YouTube and let us know, or in Discord, what are the topics that you want to hear about on the next roundtable. And we will see you guys next time.